think for all of us on this journey to God, especially all of you who day in and day out, you come to Mass, you strive, we're striving to grow, right? What are we growing towards? What are we going to? We want to grow in holiness. We want to have virtue. We want to live our life and give it away as a sacrifice. But the tension as I continue to journey with people, and I also deal with my own weak self every single day, there's a tension of striving towards perfection and yet realizing how on earth are we supposed to get there, right? The temptations and the struggles, every time we move forward, we think, oh, how can I? And then we read about the saints and we say to ourselves, well, I say to myself, there's no way. How am I going to be that saint, right? It's that tension. And sometimes we feel that we're not, it's because we're human, it's like for your work and your careers and your kids, there's levels that we reach for success. Notice how I'm going to use the word success, right? In the spiritual life, sometimes we apply that success to the spiritual life. If I understand more, if I know more, if I do this more, if I pray, if I do that, for that's success. But when you look at every saint, everyone, by the way, yeah, there are accomplishments that they go through, like Mother Teresa, she did a lot, right? But when you look deep, you have what the world would call failures in the spiritual life. A wise priest once told me, what if our view of success is definitely not what's God's view of success? But what if every single thing that we can go through when we trust God can be used for our good, even our seeming failures? From ancient times, I want you to understand that from the very beginning, before Jesus came into the picture, this is what the first reading is about. They had to constantly sacrifice animals in appeasement of sin, and yet every single animal that they killed, nothing happened with their sin, meaning they were still in sin. But what I learned in seminary is that these sacrifices reminded them of the gods that they idolized. That from the very beginning, God was trying to teach them that He was the Lord and they are not. And that all their idols are not gods. And yet, every single time the priest came to sacrifice, every animal, they killed thousands of animals, friends. And still, they were separated from God. But then it says in our first reading, but then Jesus came, and once and for all, someone stood in, and His sacrifice changed everything. Why do I tell you that? In your spiritual life, you may think that you're failing because your children aren't listening, your children are far, your faith, you're struggling, you're arguing with your spouse. Maybe your work is not okay. Maybe all the stuff. Maybe everything's falling apart around you. But remember that everything, when we surrender it to God, can be used for good. The way that the world tells you success is not the right way. And so as we're journeying, as we're striving for perfection, what if your specific trial, right now, you know what your stuff is. What if God is using that for you to grow in whatever gift, whatever virtue you want? There was a movie I watched, a priest, I was just in the seminary, and it was The Diary of a Parish Priest. Raise your hand if you've watched that movie. It's a movie, a classic movie about a priest who comes in a parish. He's very sickly. Everything seems to be failing him. Everybody's rejecting him. He can barely eat. He can barely talk. In the movie, it's like he's failing constantly. He ends up dying. He's on his deathbed, and he's reflecting on all the things that he worried about. And he said, none of it really matters because all is grace. He realized that his very life, everything he worried about, all the stresses, all the trials, everything was grace. Because in his life, God connected all the little strings of his life That even if you feel like he failed, he succeeded because he was always faithful to God. So I share that with you as we are moving forward in ordinary time. Remember, the ordinary time is not boring time. It is times when we can look at Jesus' life and follow him.